So, what is the likelihood that any of us in this room could be kidnapped and forced to make films for a North Korean?
Very unlikely. Very unlikely.
I'm a little relieved to hear that.
One thing the film neglected to mention, and is a wonderful sort of end note to the whole thing, was that Kim Jong-il could not imagine that these two close friends of his, loyal close friends of his, had actually defected. And he got a message to them saying, I know that the Americans have abducted you. Would you like me to bring you back to North Korea? And they did not respond.
Yeah, that's not something I would respond to either.
During this period, the very specific period during which Shin and Che were abducted, this was exactly the period where there was this enormous abduction project going on in North Korea, which is the subject of my book, The Invitation Only Zone. And in the 70s, late 70s, 77, 78 or so, there were dozens of Japanese being abducted from Japan. There were people being abducted from a Thai woman from Macau, a Romanian woman who was an artist who lived in Italy. There were 5 South Korean students who were abducted during that time. There were 7 Lebanese women who were abducted then during that time. So this was actually a sort of massive project that was going on. The abductions for very different reasons. They weren't all being abducted to be involved in the movie industry. So the abductions have this very long history within North Korea, and it's actually, the abductions were a form of statecraft. And even till today, you can see the way there's a poor, University of Virginia junior right now being held in North Korea. And there have been many other Americans who have been abducted in one form or detained in one form or another. I would say that this is really part of one foreign policy. This is the brutal way that the North Korean reaches out and touches the rest of the world and gets their attention and gets them to talk to them. So, this was part of that as well.
So it's all about getting the attention of the rest of the world. That's what the kidnappings are about?
Well, I mean, there were specific reasons for them. This was very much for reviving the film industry, but in the contemporary sense, yes, this is about getting them to talk. This is a way of initiating a conversation, just a brutal one.
I was just thinking about that as a kind of like a relationship tactic. If you want to get their attention, just kidnap them.
Well, it's like when you're a kid, you like a girl, you hit them. It's something similar in that way.
I never had those inclinations when I was a kid. Not to suggest that you did, but you wrote about this particular case in your book, and one in the film we see little snippets of what I presume were some of their films. Did you get to see the films that they worked on?
They're hard to find. There's a wonderful scholar at Princeton named Stephen Chung who has a lot of them, has shared some of them with me. I've seen a bunch of them. Pulgasari is the most famous one. That was sort of the North Korean version of Godzilla, sort of a camp favorite here. And that one you could actually see. Shin and Che, Shin made a number of movies afterwards, not only with Disney. He eventually did go back to South Korea, and he made actually a fantastic movie called Mayumi, which is about a North Korean terrorist who blew up. It's based on a real story. Blew up a South Korean airliner in 1987, and the idea that a guy who'd been abducted was going back and kind of recapitulating these stories, and the abduction connection there is that Mayumi, the North Korean agent, had been trained to pass as Japanese by one of the Japanese abductees, and that was one of the ways that the entire abduction project unraveled.
You might know the answer to. There are a couple of things in the film that I was a little confused about. One was when they sent the tape to their family members back in South Korea. Was that, it was unclear in the film, was that made public to the South Korean populace?
Not at first, it wasn't. This was all kept very secret.
Yeah, because I was wondering if there would have been repercussions for them,
Well, I mean, one thing you have to realize, I'm sure some of you know, is that up until today, actually, there's a national security law in South Korea which makes it illegal for any South Korean national to set foot in North Korea, regardless of how you get there. So Che and Shin had already violated the national security law. And then, obviously, the kind of, we love you dearly, we want to make great movies for you. This was not going to play very well in South Korea, and many of these poor fishermen a few of whom I've actually interviewed, who had done nothing like that, but they were thrown in jail right away when they came back and then were prosecuted for espionage, for even having been in North Korea.
Prior to their escape, they had sent that bag of tapes to the U.S. State Department. I was just wondering, when they finally made it to the embassy in Austria, if somebody already knew, that was going to happen, or if when they contacted DC, it was like, oh, these are the guys who sent the tapes,
Right, I think the tapes, my understanding is that the original tapes that were sent to the family of them just speaking into the tape recorder, that made its way from their family to the South Korean government to the Americans. It wasn't until they arrived with the tapes that showed that they had with these conversations, and it was very important for them because, to this day, there's some people who believe that Shin, as they said, Shin defected. She might have been abducted, but he defected. He was very much on the outs in South Korea. His film, Shin Films, his film company, had fallen apart. He was in disfavor with the regime there, Park Chung-hee. There had been all these sort of limits on kind of films that could be made, so his career was effectively over. And so the idea that you would go to some place like North Korea, which would give you limitless funds to make the films, and you can see he's very happy about that already. One thing I don't know if you noticed, in the one scene they showed of one of his films, there was a train blowing up. That was a real train that Kim Jong-il blew up for Shin. He said that one of the things that was amazing was that there was no effect that was too big for him to make. They would get thousands, tens of thousands of extras for all this sort of scenes. So it was this really, he was kind of in this filmmaker's heaven in a way. Che is still alive. She's quite elderly. Shin died in 2006. He had a transplant and then died of hepatitis. The two kids that they adopted, as you spoke, they're still living in Seoul. Shin also had two children by the actress he had the affair with, and I assume they're still there. I don't know. I don't know about their whereabouts. You read the memoir, and it's painful because Shin is there looking for her or asking about her. He has no idea whether she's dead or alive. She has no idea that he's even missing. She's in a series of these sort of palaces, these guest houses, living this kind of life of leisure, but really bored. And he just thinks, I've got to get out of prison so I can go find her. So he keeps on escaping. And the flunkies who are keeping him in prison, they don't know who he really is or why he's really there. What they do know is, and they got at this a little bit, is that he'll be interrogated. Any other prisoner who would escape this many times as being interrogated is probably going to get a bullet. And all of a sudden, he noticed that someone was taking notes and bringing it out. So Kim Jong-il was sort of looking in on by proxy on and would bail him out every time. But there was this sort of strange series of steps between Kim and between Shin, so that and no one sort of said, by the way, if you stop trying to escape from these prisons, you can go get together with your ex-wife and live a life of luxuries.
Was there any valuable intelligence there?
Well, I think it was the same kind of intelligence that, here's a guy who is literally, the North Korean people had heard Kim Jong-il utter 6 words. That's it. And, he was really very little, think how little we know about Kim Jong-un, we don't even know his age. Very little was known about Kim Jong-il. So the kind of things that I don't think that they were learning lessons about or giving information about the nuclear program, but it was really much more personal stuff. It's a good question. In 2002, 5 of the Japanese abductees were returned to Japan, initially for a visit. There was a very high-level meeting between Junichiro Koizumi, the Prime Minister of Japan, and Kim Jong-il in 2002 on September 15th, in which there was a Pyongyang declaration. And as part of the declaration, which was supposed to lead towards normalization between Japan and North Korea, he had to come clean about the fact of these abductions, which for decades the North had been denying. And more than that, had to release and account for the whereabouts of the abductees, the Japanese abductees. one man's defector is another man's abductee. So, and this is the problem that Shin and Che faced. They said, well, wait, we were abducted, and the story is so crazy, so outlandish, and immediately suspicion falls over them if they are, the moment they set foot in North Korea. So I couldn't even guess at that. But for everybody who claims to have been abducted, you will find somebody who says, no, they really defected. There are a number of cases. I don't know about people who escaped and came back, but there are a number of cases of people in terms of abductions who have been taken from Western European cities. There was one couple that was actually trying to defect from North Korea, and their taxi driver brought them to the North Korean, not the South Korean embassy in the city they were in, and that ended things for them. So there were terrible consequences for that. Yeah. No, there wasn't. She actually said he was a gentleman. He's quite a bit younger than she is, and he was very respectful toward her. So no, there wasn't. She goes out of her way in her memoirs to indicate that there was no hanky-panky going on between her and Kim, who she found just physically repulsive anyway, which she also is very clear about.
He's just misunderstood, I think.
Yeah, he is.
So thank you, Robert, and thank you for coming out tonight.